Question 1. The review process indicates that a critical new market opportunity requires a swift strategic decision regarding resource allocation. While there is pressure to commit significant investment immediately, a preliminary assessment suggests potential unforeseen technical challenges and a lack of comprehensive market data. The team is divided on the best course of action, with some advocating for immediate commitment to seize the opportunity, while others urge for a more cautious, data-gathering approach. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach to making this decision? Option A. Rely on the judgment of the most senior executive present, whose past experience in similar situations is considered sufficient to guide the decision without further extensive analysis. Option B. Proceed with the investment based on the initial positive market signals and the urgency of the opportunity, assuming that any technical challenges can be addressed post-commitment. Option C. Initiate a structured, multidisciplinary review to gather all necessary technical and market data, consult with relevant internal and external experts, and develop a comprehensive risk-benefit analysis before committing resources. Option D. Defer the decision indefinitely until absolute certainty regarding all technical aspects and market reception is achieved to avoid any potential risk. Correct answer is C. Initiate a structured, multidisciplinary review to gather all necessary technical and market data, consult with relevant internal and external experts, and develop a comprehensive risk-benefit analysis before committing resources. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a decision with the imperative to conduct thorough due diligence. The pressure to act quickly can lead to overlooking critical information or potential risks, which could have significant financial and reputational consequences for Mitsubishi Electric. The complexity arises from the need to assess multiple factors, including market viability, technical feasibility, and potential ethical implications, all within a constrained timeframe. Careful judgment is required to avoid hasty decisions that could lead to suboptimal outcomes or regulatory breaches. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, evidence-based decision-making process. This involves gathering comprehensive data, consulting relevant internal and external experts, and systematically evaluating all available options against predefined criteria. This method aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that decisions are informed, objective, and defensible. It minimizes the risk of bias and promotes accountability. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible business conduct, adherence to internal policies, and a duty of care to stakeholders, which are fundamental principles expected of employees in a reputable organization like Mitsubishi Electric. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed over thoroughness, leading to a decision based on incomplete information. This is professionally unacceptable, as it increases the likelihood of making a poor strategic choice, potentially resulting in financial losses or missed opportunities. Ethically, it can be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence and a lack of commitment to achieving the best possible outcome for the company. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the opinion of a single senior individual without independent verification or broader consultation. This introduces a significant risk of confirmation bias and groupthink, where dissenting opinions or critical information might be suppressed. This approach fails to leverage the collective expertise within the organization and can lead to decisions that are not robust or well-considered, potentially violating principles of good governance and risk management. A further incorrect approach is to make a decision based on personal intuition or past experiences without validating their relevance to the current situation. While experience is valuable, it should be supplemented with current data and analysis. Relying solely on intuition can lead to overlooking new market dynamics, technological advancements, or evolving regulatory landscapes, thereby exposing the company to unnecessary risks and potentially leading to non-compliance with current standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes problem definition, information gathering, option generation, evaluation of options against criteria, selection of the best option, implementation, and review. This systematic approach ensures that all relevant factors are considered, potential risks are identified and mitigated, and the decision is aligned with the company's strategic objectives and ethical standards. In situations with time constraints, It is crucial to identify the minimum essential information required for a sound decision and to delegate tasks efficiently to gather this information promptly. Question 2. The analysis reveals that a new product launch by Mitsubishi Electric could significantly alter the competitive landscape and potentially trigger new regulatory scrutiny. Which of the following approaches to assessing this impact is most professionally sound and compliant with best practices for responsible market entry? Option A. Focus solely on the projected revenue growth from the new product, downplaying any potential negative market reactions or regulatory concerns as unlikely to materialize. Option B. Assume that existing regulations are sufficient and that market dynamics will naturally self-correct, requiring no proactive impact assessment beyond initial product development. Option C. Rely on informal discussions with sales representatives and industry gossip to gauge competitor reactions and assume regulatory bodies will not intervene unless a clear violation occurs. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive market analysis using historical sales data, competitor intelligence, and expert consultations to forecast market share shifts and identify potential regulatory compliance gaps. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive market analysis using historical sales data, competitor intelligence, and expert consultations to forecast market share shifts and identify potential regulatory compliance gaps. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in assessing the potential impact of a new product launch on existing market dynamics and regulatory compliance. Mitsubishi Electric, as a global technology provider, must navigate complex market conditions and adhere to stringent regulations in its operating jurisdictions. The challenge lies in accurately forecasting these impacts and developing mitigation strategies that are both commercially viable and legally sound, without resorting to speculative or unsubstantiated claims. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based impact assessment that considers all relevant factors, including market competition, consumer behavior, and potential regulatory changes. This aligns with principles of responsible business conduct and proactive risk management. By focusing on quantifiable data and established market trends, the assessment provides a reliable foundation for strategic decision-making. This approach is ethically sound as it avoids misleading stakeholders and is legally compliant by anticipating and addressing potential regulatory hurdles. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency and due diligence, which are paramount in maintaining stakeholder trust and ensuring long-term business sustainability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely rely on anecdotal evidence or competitor rumors to gauge market impact. This is professionally unacceptable because it lacks empirical support, leading to potentially flawed strategic decisions and misallocation of resources. Ethically, it can result in misleading internal stakeholders and external partners about the true market landscape. From a regulatory perspective, decisions based on such flimsy evidence could inadvertently lead to noncompliance if they fail to account for actual market realities or regulatory requirements. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss potential regulatory impacts as unlikely or insignificant without a formal review. This is a critical failure in professional judgment and regulatory adherence. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the legal framework governing business operations. Such an approach could expose the company to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions if unforeseen regulatory changes occur or existing regulations are misinterpreted. A third incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the potential positive impacts of the new product, ignoring any potential negative consequences or market disruptions. This biased perspective is professionally unsound as it prevents a balanced and realistic assessment. It can lead to overconfidence, inadequate risk mitigation planning, and ultimately, a failure to achieve desired outcomes. Ethically, it is deceptive to present an incomplete picture of potential impacts. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured and objective approach to impact assessment. This involves 1. Defining the scope of the assessment clearly. 2. Gathering relevant data from credible sources, market research, historical performance, regulatory updates. 3. Employing analytical frameworks to evaluate potential impacts, e.g., SWOT analysis, PESTLE analysis. 4. Identifying and quantifying risks and opportunities. 5. Developing concrete mitigation and enhancement strategies. 6. Documenting the entire process and its findings transparently. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both business objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 3. The audit findings indicate a significant unexpected outage in a core customer relationship management (CRM) system. To address this, what is the most appropriate initial step in assessing the situation's ramifications? Option A. Immediately initiate a full-scale recovery plan based on the assumption that the system is critical and its failure has widespread consequences. Option B. Assign the task of assessing the impact to the IT support team that manages the CRM system, trusting their technical understanding to cover all necessary aspects. Option C. Rely on historical data from previous minor system glitches to estimate the current outage's impact, assuming a similar level of disruption. Option D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify all affected business processes, stakeholders, potential financial losses, and reputational damage before finalizing recovery priorities. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a full-scale recovery plan based on the assumption that the system is critical and its failure has widespread consequences. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term implications of a significant system failure. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to shortcuts that might compromise the integrity of the impact assessment, potentially leading to underestimation of risks and inadequate resource allocation for recovery and future prevention. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the assessment is thorough, even under duress. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured and comprehensive impact assessment. This involves systematically identifying all affected systems, processes, and stakeholders, quantifying the potential business disruption, financial, reputational, operational, and evaluating the criticality of each element. This aligns with general principles of risk management and business continuity planning, which are implicitly expected in any professional assessment of system failures. While specific regulations for Mitsubishi Electric's internal hiring assessment test are not provided, the underlying principles of due diligence and thoroughness in assessing operational impact are universally recognized in professional environments. A detailed impact assessment ensures that recovery efforts are prioritized effectively and that lessons learned are incorporated into future resilience strategies. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the immediate technical fix without considering the broader business consequences. This fails to meet professional standards by neglecting the potential for cascading failures, customer dissatisfaction, regulatory noncompliance, if applicable to the system's function, and long-term reputational damage. Represents a failure in comprehensive risk assessment and business continuity planning. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire impact assessment to a single junior team member without adequate oversight or guidance. This is professionally unacceptable as it risks a superficial analysis, a lack of diverse perspectives, and an incomplete understanding of the business context. It demonstrates a failure in management responsibility and quality control, potentially leading to significant oversights that could have severe business implications. A third incorrect approach would be to assume the impact is minimal based on past, less severe incidents. This is a dangerous assumption that ignores the possibility of evolving system dependencies, increased data sensitivity, or changes in operational criticality. It represents a failure in critical thinking and a disregard for the principle of continuous risk evaluation, potentially leading to under-resourcing of recovery and mitigation efforts. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first establishing a clear framework for the impact assessment, even if it needs to be adapted for urgency. This framework should include defining scope, identifying stakeholders, categorizing impacts, financial, operational, reputational, legal/regulatory, and establishing criteria for severity. They should then gather information systematically, consult with relevant departments, and critically evaluate the data. The process should involve cross-functional collaboration to ensure all perspectives are considered. Finally, the findings should be documented clearly, highlighting assumptions, limitations, and recommended actions, and then reviewed by senior management or a designated authority before decisions are made. Question 4. The assessment process reveals that a proposed operational change within Mitsubishi Electric's manufacturing division may have significant implications for workflow efficiency and resource allocation. To ensure a comprehensive understanding of these implications, which of the following approaches best aligns with a robust impact assessment methodology? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of all potential environmental, social, economic, and operational impacts, engaging with relevant internal departments and external experts where necessary, and documenting all findings and assumptions. Option B. Rely on the personal experience of senior management to gauge the likely effects of the change without extensive data collection. Option C. Focus the assessment solely on the direct financial gains, disregarding any potential disruptions to other business units or employee morale. Option D. Prioritize immediate cost reduction benefits and assume that any negative consequences will be manageable through subsequent adjustments. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed analysis of all potential environmental, social, economic, and operational impacts, engaging with relevant internal departments and external experts where necessary, and documenting all findings and assumptions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the complexities of an impact assessment within the specific regulatory framework of the Mitsubishi Electric Hiring Assessment Test. The core difficulty lies in accurately identifying and evaluating the potential consequences of a proposed change, ensuring that all relevant stakeholders and potential risks are considered, and that the assessment aligns with the ethical and legal standards expected within the company and its operating jurisdiction. The pressure to deliver a comprehensive and compliant assessment, even with incomplete initial information, demands a structured and principled approach to decision-making. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and systematic evaluation of all potential impacts, both positive and negative, across various dimensions. This includes considering environmental, social, economic, and operational factors. By engaging with relevant stakeholders and seeking expert input, it ensures a holistic understanding of the proposed change's ramifications. This aligns with the ethical imperative to act responsibly and with due diligence, and with any implied regulatory requirements for impact assessments to be comprehensive and evidence-based. It demonstrates a commitment to informed decision-making and risk mitigation, which are fundamental to professional integrity and operational excellence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without considering long-term consequences would fail to meet the standards of a responsible impact assessment. This would represent a regulatory failure by potentially overlooking environmental or social impacts that are subject to specific regulations or company policies. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for broader stakeholder interests. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal assumptions rather than data-driven analysis would be professionally unacceptable. This would constitute a failure to adhere to best practices in impact assessment, which demand objective and verifiable information. Such an approach could lead to flawed conclusions and potentially harmful outcomes, violating principles of accuracy and reliability. A third incorrect approach that neglects to consult with affected departments or external stakeholders would be a significant ethical and potentially regulatory lapse. This demonstrates a failure to engage in good faith with those who will be impacted by the change, leading to potential unforeseen issues and a breakdown in communication and collaboration. It undermines the principle of transparency and inclusivity in decision-making processes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the assessment's objectives, a systematic identification of potential impacts, a commitment to gathering robust evidence, consultation with all relevant parties, and a thorough analysis of findings against established criteria and regulatory requirements. It requires a proactive approach to risk identification and mitigation, and a willingness to adapt the assessment as new information becomes available. Question 5. During the evaluation of a new AI-driven predictive maintenance system for manufacturing equipment, which approach to assessing its potential impact would be considered most professionally responsible and comprehensive? Option A. Relying on case studies from similar industries and assuming the outcomes will directly translate to Mitsubishi Electric's operations. Option B. Conducting a detailed analysis of potential operational efficiency gains and cost reductions, while also evaluating potential impacts on employee roles, data privacy, and system security. Option C, focusing exclusively on the projected return on investment ROI and the system's ability to reduce immediate equipment downtime. Option D, prioritizing the fastest possible implementation to gain a competitive advantage, with a plan to address any issues that arise post-deployment. The correct answer is B, conducting a detailed analysis of potential operational efficiency gains and cost reductions, while also evaluating potential impacts on employee roles, data privacy, and system security. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of a new technology's integration. The core difficulty lies in anticipating and mitigating potential negative impacts that might not be immediately apparent during the initial assessment phase. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to ensure that the adoption of new technology aligns with Mitsubishi Electric's strategic objectives, ethical commitments, and any relevant regulatory guidelines that govern technological deployment and data handling, even if not explicitly stated in the prompt. A responsible company operates within a framework of best practices and potential future regulations. The correct approach, which involves a comprehensive, multifaceted impact assessment, represents best professional practice because it proactively identifies and addresses potential risks and benefits across various domains. This includes considering operational efficiency gains, but also critically examining potential impacts on employee roles, data security, customer privacy, environmental sustainability, and the company's reputation. By engaging stakeholders and utilizing a structured methodology, this approach ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and aligned with broader corporate governance principles. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of unforeseen negative consequences and maximizes the chances of successful and beneficial technology adoption. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings would be professionally unacceptable due to its narrow scope. This failure neglects potential downstream costs associated with employee retraining, data breaches, or reputational damage, which could far outweigh the initial savings. It also demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the broader ethical implications of technological change. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes speed of implementation over thoroughness, risks overlooking critical vulnerabilities or unintended consequences. This haste can lead to costly rework, system failures, or non-compliance with emerging standards, ultimately undermining the project's success and the company's credibility. A third incorrect approach, which relies on anecdotal evidence or the experiences of other companies without specific due diligence, is professionally unsound because it fails to account for Mitsubishi Electric's unique operational context, existing infrastructure, and specific business objectives. This can lead to the adoption of solutions that are ill-suited or even detrimental to the organization. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the impact assessment. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders and potential impact areas. Subsequently, data should be gathered through a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods, including expert consultations, scenario planning, and risk analysis. The findings should then be synthesized to inform a well-reasoned recommendation, which is then communicated transparently to relevant decision-makers. This iterative process of assessment, analysis, and communication ensures that decisions are robust, defensible, and aligned with the organization's best interests and ethical obligations. Question 6. The risk matrix shows a potential for environmental contamination from a new manufacturing process. Which of the following best describes the necessary next step in a comprehensive impact assessment? Option A. Focus solely on the cost of potential cleanup if contamination occurs. Option B. Note the potential for environmental contamination on the risk register. Option C. Quantify the potential severity of the contamination, the likelihood of its occurrence, and identify affected stakeholders and ecosystems. Option D. Immediately halt the new manufacturing process due to the identified risk. The correct answer is C. Quantify the potential severity of the contamination, the likelihood of its occurrence, and identify affected stakeholders and ecosystems. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of impact assessment beyond simple identification. The challenge lies in distinguishing between a superficial acknowledgement of potential harm and a robust, actionable assessment that aligns with regulatory expectations and ethical responsibilities. Mitsubishi Electric, as a global entity, operates under various regulatory frameworks, and for the purpose of this assessment, we will assume adherence to general principles of corporate responsibility and risk management that are common across developed markets, emphasizing the need for thoroughness and foresight. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic evaluation of the magnitude and likelihood of potential negative consequences, considering both direct and indirect effects. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which mandate proactive identification and mitigation of risks. A thorough impact assessment ensures that potential harm to stakeholders, the environment, and the company's reputation is understood in sufficient detail to inform decision-making and resource allocation for mitigation strategies. This proactive stance is often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory bodies overseeing corporate conduct and environmental stewardship, promoting a culture of responsibility. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the presence of a potential negative event, without quantifying its severity or probability, fails to meet the standards of a comprehensive impact assessment. This oversight can lead to underestimation of risks, inadequate resource allocation for mitigation, and ultimately, a failure to prevent or minimize harm. Such a failure could be viewed as a breach of due diligence, potentially contravening ethical obligations to stakeholders, and in some jurisdictions, specific regulatory requirements for risk management. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate financial cost over potential long-term or non-financial impacts demonstrates a myopic view of risk. While financial prudence is important, a true impact assessment must consider a broader spectrum of consequences, including reputational damage, legal liabilities, environmental degradation, and social disruption. Ignoring these can lead to significant unforeseen costs and regulatory scrutiny. This approach fails to uphold the ethical duty of care and can result in non-compliance with broader corporate social responsibility mandates. A further incorrect approach that relies on historical data alone without considering evolving circumstances or novel risks is also professionally deficient. While historical data provides a valuable baseline, it may not adequately capture the potential impact of new technologies, changing market conditions, or emerging regulatory landscapes. A dynamic and forward-looking impact assessment is crucial for anticipating and preparing for future challenges, ensuring that mitigation strategies remain relevant and effective. This static approach can lead to a false sense of security and leave the organization vulnerable to unforeseen events. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Define the scope of the assessment clearly. 2. Identify all potential negative impacts across various categories: financial, reputational, environmental, social, legal. 3. For each identified impact, assess its likelihood and potential magnitude severity. 4. Prioritize impacts based on their assessed risk level. 5. Develop and implement appropriate mitigation and contingency plans. 6. Regularly review and update the impact assessment to reflect changing circumstances. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new automated inventory management system could significantly reduce operational costs and improve efficiency. However, this system would likely lead to a reduction in the number of warehouse staff required. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates responsible impact assessment and professional conduct? Option A. Proceed with the implementation immediately to realize the cost savings, informing the affected staff only after the system is fully operational. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that quantifies potential cost savings, analyzes the human resource implications including retraining and redeployment options, evaluates the impact on supply chain partners, and outlines a phased implementation plan with clear communication to all stakeholders. Option C. Implement the new system based on a brief internal discussion among senior management, assuming that any staff reductions will be handled through standard attrition. Option D. Delay the implementation indefinitely due to the potential negative impact on staff morale, even though the cost savings are substantial and could benefit the company's long-term viability. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the implementation immediately to realize the cost savings, informing the affected staff only after the system is fully operational. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing potential operational efficiencies with the ethical and regulatory obligations to inform stakeholders about significant changes. Core tension lies in the immediate perceived benefits of a new system versus the potential negative impacts on employees and the broader business environment, which must be proactively assessed and communicated. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive impact assessment that considers all relevant stakeholders and potential consequences. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and ethical business conduct, which mandate transparency and due diligence. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of regulatory frameworks that require organizations to manage risks, ensure fair treatment of employees, and maintain market confidence. By conducting a thorough assessment before implementation, the company demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation and stakeholder engagement, mitigating potential legal, reputational, and operational risks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings without considering the human element or broader implications fails to meet ethical and regulatory standards. Such an approach could lead to employee dissatisfaction, reduced morale, and potential legal challenges related to employment law or data privacy if the new system involves handling sensitive information. Another incorrect approach that delays or omits a formal impact assessment, proceeding directly with implementation based on preliminary findings, risks overlooking critical issues. This can result in unforeseen disruptions, compliance breaches, and damage to the company's reputation. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal feedback rather than a structured assessment is inherently unreliable and can lead to flawed decision-making, potentially exposing the company to significant risks that could have been identified and managed through a systematic process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope of the proposed change and its objectives. This should be followed by a systematic identification of all potential impacts: economic, social, environmental, and operational on all relevant stakeholders. A robust impact assessment process should involve data collection, analysis, and consultation. Based on the findings, a risk mitigation strategy should be developed, and a clear communication plan should be established for all affected parties. Finally, a post-implementation review should be conducted to evaluate the actual outcomes against the projected impacts. Question 8. Regulatory review indicates that Mitsubishi Electric is considering the integration of advanced AI-driven predictive maintenance features into its industrial automation products. To ensure compliance and responsible deployment, what is the most appropriate approach for conducting an impact assessment of this new technology? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive, multidisciplinary impact assessment involving external experts and stakeholder consultation to evaluate potential environmental, social, ethical, and security implications, and develop robust mitigation strategies. Option B. Limit the impact assessment to a review of existing internal documentation on AI safety and cybersecurity, assuming that these are sufficient to cover all potential consequences of the new features. Option C. Prioritize the speed of market entry by conducting a brief assessment focusing only on the immediate technical benefits and operational efficiencies, deferring any broader impact considerations to post-launch product updates. Option D. Delegate the entire impact assessment process to the product development team, with the understanding that their primary focus is on technical functionality and market competitiveness. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive, multidisciplinary impact assessment involving external experts and stakeholder consultation to evaluate potential environmental, social, ethical, and security implications, and develop robust mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to innovate and expand its product line and the regulatory obligation to conduct thorough impact assessments before introducing new technologies. The challenge lies in balancing business objectives with the need for responsible product development that considers potential societal and environmental consequences, as mandated by regulatory frameworks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the assessment is comprehensive, objective, and not unduly influenced by commercial pressures. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive impact assessment that goes beyond mere compliance. This means engaging with relevant stakeholders, including potential users, environmental experts, and regulatory bodies, to gather diverse perspectives. It necessitates a thorough evaluation of potential risks, benefits, and unintended consequences across various domains such as environmental sustainability, data privacy, cybersecurity, and societal equity. This approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the spirit and letter of regulatory requirements, fostering trust, mitigating future liabilities, and promoting responsible innovation. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical product stewardship and long-term business sustainability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed to market over the depth of the impact assessment. This could lead to overlooking critical risks or failing to adequately address potential negative externalities, thereby violating regulatory mandates for due diligence and potentially exposing the company to significant legal and reputational damage. It represents a failure to uphold professional responsibility and a disregard for the precautionary principle often embedded in regulatory frameworks. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial assessment that focuses only on the most obvious or easily quantifiable impacts, while neglecting more complex or indirect consequences. This narrow focus can result in a skewed understanding of the technology's true impact, leading to decisions that are not in the best interest of society or the environment. It is a regulatory failure as it does not fulfill the requirement for a comprehensive evaluation of all material impacts. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the impact assessment to a team with insufficient expertise or independence, or to allow commercial interests to unduly influence the findings. This compromises the integrity and objectivity of the assessment, rendering it unreliable and potentially misleading. It constitutes an ethical failure and a breach of regulatory oversight, as the assessment must be conducted impartially. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach impact assessments by first clearly defining the scope and objectives in alignment with regulatory expectations. They should then establish a robust methodology that includes diverse data sources, expert input, and stakeholder consultation. A critical step is to maintain objectivity throughout the process, ensuring that findings are evidence-based and not swayed by internal biases or commercial pressures. Finally, the assessment should culminate in clear recommendations for risk mitigation and responsible implementation, with a plan for ongoing monitoring and review. Question 9. The control framework reveals that a senior engineer, responsible for approving critical component suppliers, has a close family member who is a significant shareholder in one of the potential supplier companies. The engineer is aware of this relationship, but has not disclosed it to their superiors or the compliance department. They believe they can still make an objective decision based on the technical merits of the supplier's proposal. What is the most appropriate course of action for the senior engineer? Option A. Subtly advocate for the family member's company during internal discussions, highlighting its strengths without explicitly mentioning the personal connection. Option B. Immediately disclose the relationship to the compliance officer and recuse themselves from the supplier approval process. Option C. Proceed with the approval process, confident in their ability to remain objective and select the best supplier based on technical merit. Option D. Delegate the final approval decision to a trusted subordinate, without informing them of the potential conflict of interest. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the relationship to the compliance officer and recuse themselves from the supplier approval process. Explanation. The control framework reveals a potential conflict of interest arising from a senior engineer's involvement in approving a critical component supplier where their close relative holds a significant stake. This scenario is professionally challenging because it tests the individual's adherence to ethical principles and company policy, requiring a judgment call that balances business needs with integrity. The core challenge lies in ensuring that decisions are made impartially, free from undue influence, and in the best interest of Mitsubishi Electric, rather than personal relationships. The correct approach, which involves immediate disclosure of the relationship to the relevant compliance officer or management and recusal from the decision-making process, represents best professional practice. This aligns with fundamental ethical principles of transparency and avoiding conflicts of interest, as often stipulated in corporate codes of conduct and reinforced by industry best practices for engineering and procurement. Such disclosure allows for an objective review and reassignment of the approval process, safeguarding the integrity of the procurement decision and preventing any perception of favoritism. This proactive measure upholds the company's reputation and ensures compliance with internal governance structures designed to mitigate risks. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the approval without disclosure would constitute a significant ethical failure and a breach of trust. It creates an environment where decisions might be compromised, leading to potentially suboptimal supplier selection based on personal ties rather than merit, quality, or cost-effectiveness. This could expose Mitsubishi Electric to supply chain risks, reputational damage, and potential regulatory scrutiny if such practices are uncovered. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to subtly influence the decision in favor of the relative's company without explicit disclosure, is equally problematic. This is a form of deception that undermines the control framework and demonstrates a lack of integrity. It also fails to address the underlying conflict of interest, leaving the company vulnerable. A further incorrect approach, such as delegating the decision to a subordinate without informing them of the conflict, is also unacceptable. This not only shirks responsibility, but also places the subordinate in an ethically compromised position, potentially leading them to make a decision based on incomplete or misleading information, thereby perpetuating the conflict. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's code of conduct and conflict of interest policies. When a potential conflict arises, the professional should first identify the nature of the conflict and its potential impact. The next step is to consult relevant policies and seek guidance from supervisors or the compliance department. Transparency and open communication are paramount. Recusal from any decision-making process where a conflict exists is a standard and necessary step to ensure impartiality and maintain ethical standards. Question 10. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual fluctuation in a key performance indicator for a critical manufacturing process. While the alert is flagged as high priority, initial diagnostic checks by the junior technician suggest it might be a sensor calibration issue rather than a genuine process failure. The production manager is pressing for an immediate decision on whether to halt operations to prevent potential damage. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Advise the production manager to ignore the alert for now, assuming it is a false positive based on the junior technician's initial assessment, and continue operations as normal. Option B. Proceed with recalibrating the suspected sensor immediately without further investigation, as this is the quickest way to resolve the potential issue. Option C. Immediately halt the production line to err on the side of caution and prevent any potential damage, as indicated by the high-priority alert. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive cross-verification of the anomaly using historical data, other related sensor readings, and diagnostic logs, while simultaneously consulting the senior engineering team for expert opinion before making any decision on operational status. The correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive cross-verification of the anomaly using historical data, other related sensor readings, and diagnostic logs, while simultaneously consulting the senior engineering team for expert opinion before making any decision on operational status. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for timely data analysis and the potential for misinterpretation or premature action based on incomplete or preliminary information. The pressure to respond quickly to system anomalies, especially in a critical operational environment like that managed by Mitsubishi Electric, requires a nuanced approach that balances urgency with accuracy and adherence to established protocols. The professional must exercise sound judgment to avoid overreacting or underreacting, both of which could have significant operational or financial consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and evidence-based response. It prioritizes verifying the anomaly through cross-referencing with multiple data sources and consulting relevant technical documentation or subject matter experts. This aligns with best professional practices in operational monitoring and incident management, which mandate thorough investigation before implementing corrective actions. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach upholds the principle of due diligence, ensuring that decisions are informed and responsible, thereby minimizing the risk of unnecessary disruption or damage. It also reflects a commitment to operational integrity and the accurate functioning of the systems under management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately initiating a system shutdown based solely on the initial alert. This fails to meet the standard of due diligence and could lead to unnecessary downtime, production losses, and potential damage to customer relationships. It represents a failure to investigate and verify, potentially violating internal operational procedures and industry best practices for incident response. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the alert without further investigation, assuming it is a false positive. This demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and a failure to adhere to established monitoring protocols. It could lead to a missed critical issue, resulting in significant operational failure, safety hazards, or financial losses, and would be a clear breach of professional responsibility to maintain system integrity. A third incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal evidence or the opinion of a single, less experienced team member without corroboration. This introduces subjectivity and a high risk of error, undermining the objective and systematic nature of effective monitoring. It fails to leverage the collective knowledge and established verification processes, potentially leading to incorrect diagnoses and inappropriate responses, which is ethically and professionally unsound. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process when faced with system anomalies. This process typically involves 1. Acknowledging and logging the alert. 2. Initial assessment of the alert's severity and potential impact. 3. Verification of the anomaly using multiple, independent data sources and diagnostic tools. 4. Consultation with subject matter experts or escalation according to established procedures. 5. Development and implementation of a corrective action plan based on verified findings. 6. Post-incident review and documentation. This systematic approach ensures that actions are proportionate, effective, and compliant with professional standards and any applicable regulatory requirements. Question 11. Implementation of a new investment strategy for a long-term client who has expressed a strong desire for aggressive growth, but whose financial circumstances suggest a moderate risk tolerance. The client has specifically requested a particular high-risk, high-return product that is known to carry significant fees and potential for substantial capital loss. Option A. Recommend the specific product requested by the client, emphasizing its potential for high returns and downplaying the associated risks and fees, as the client has explicitly asked for it. Option B. Proceed with recommending the client's requested product, but only after obtaining a signed waiver from the client acknowledging the risks and fees, without further investigation into suitability. Option C. Conduct a detailed fact-finding exercise to understand the client's true risk tolerance, financial capacity, and long-term goals, and then recommend a diversified portfolio of suitable investments that align with these factors, even if it means not recommending the specific product requested. Option D. Advise the client that their requested product is too risky and suggest a very conservative investment strategy that offers minimal returns, as this is the safest option, regardless of their stated growth objective. The correct answer is A. Recommend the specific product requested by the client, emphasizing its potential for high returns and downplaying the associated risks and fees, as the client has explicitly asked for it. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's desire for a specific investment outcome and the advisor's duty to act in the client's best interest, adhering to regulatory requirements. The advisor must navigate the complexities of product suitability, disclosure, and potential conflicts of interest. Careful judgment is required to ensure that recommendations are not driven by incentives, but by the client's documented needs and risk tolerance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the client's financial well-being and regulatory compliance. By conducting a thorough fact-finding process, documenting the client's objectives, risk tolerance, and financial situation, and then recommending products that demonstrably align with these factors, the advisor fulfills their fiduciary duty. This aligns with the principles of client-centric advice, ensuring that recommendations are suitable and that all relevant information, including potential conflicts of interest, is transparently disclosed. This proactive documentation and client-focused recommendation process is a cornerstone of regulatory frameworks designed to protect investors. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the client's stated desire for high returns without adequately assessing their risk tolerance or financial capacity would be a regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to unsuitable recommendations, exposing the client to undue risk and potentially violating regulations that mandate suitability assessments. Another incorrect approach, which involves recommending a product primarily because it offers a higher commission, even if it's not the most suitable option for the client, represents a clear conflict of interest and a breach of ethical conduct. This prioritizes the advisor's gain over the client's best interest, which is a direct contravention of regulatory expectations and ethical standards. A third incorrect approach, failing to disclose all material information about a product, including its risks and associated fees, is a violation of disclosure requirements and undermines the client's ability to make an informed decision, leading to potential regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the client's needs and objectives. This should be followed by a rigorous assessment of product suitability, considering all relevant client characteristics. Transparency and disclosure are paramount throughout the process. If a conflict of interest arises, it must be identified, managed, and disclosed appropriately. The ultimate decision should always be justifiable based on the client's best interests and in full compliance with all applicable regulations. Question 12. The assessment process reveals that a junior engineer is tasked with a critical component modification for an upcoming product launch. While reviewing the existing design documentation, the engineer identifies a potential improvement that could enhance performance, but requires a deviation from a standard testing protocol outlined in the company's quality manual. The engineer is under pressure to meet a tight deadline for the product launch. Considering the company's commitment to quality and compliance, what is the most appropriate course of action for the junior engineer? Option A. Delay the project significantly to conduct an extensive, independent review of all related documentation and industry best practices to ensure the proposed modification is absolutely optimal, even if it means missing the launch deadline. Option B. Immediately implement the proposed modification and conduct a new set of tests based on the engineer's revised protocol, without seeking prior approval or consulting senior engineering or quality assurance. Option C. Consult with senior engineering staff and the quality assurance department to discuss the proposed improvement and the deviation from the standard testing protocol, seeking their guidance and approval before proceeding. Option D. Proceed with the modification and the revised testing approach, assuming the improvement outweighs the minor deviation from the standard protocol, and inform the project manager of the change after implementation. Correct answer is D. Proceed with the modification and the revised testing approach, assuming the improvement outweighs the minor deviation from the standard protocol, and inform the project manager of the change after implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the interpretation and application of internal company policies and potentially industry best practices, which are often informed by regulatory expectations. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient project execution with the imperative to adhere to established quality and compliance standards. A junior engineer might be tempted to prioritize speed to meet deadlines, potentially overlooking critical procedural steps that ensure product integrity and safety, which are fundamental to Mitsubishi Electric's reputation and regulatory compliance. The pressure to deliver quickly, coupled with a lack of complete understanding of the underlying rationale for certain procedures, can lead to a deviation from established protocols. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and collaborative engagement with senior engineering staff and the quality assurance department. This demonstrates an understanding that adherence to established procedures, even if they seem time-consuming, is paramount for ensuring product quality, reliability, and compliance with industry standards and any applicable regulations that Mitsubishi Electric operates under. Seeking clarification and guidance from experienced colleagues and the QA team is not a sign of weakness, but a mark of professional responsibility. It ensures that any deviations or proposed shortcuts are thoroughly vetted against established quality gates and regulatory requirements, thereby mitigating risks of product failure, recalls, or non-compliance. This approach upholds the company's commitment to excellence and its ethical obligation to produce safe and reliable products. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the modification without seeking further clarification, assuming the existing documentation is sufficient or that the change is minor enough not to warrant additional review. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it bypasses established quality control mechanisms designed to prevent errors and ensure compliance. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential consequences of unverified changes, which could lead to product defects, safety issues, and ultimately, breaches of regulatory standards. Another incorrect approach is to implement the change based solely on the advice of a peer, who may also lack the full context or authority to approve such modifications. This creates a cascade of potential errors and undermines the formal quality assurance process. It represents an ethical failure by not adhering to the established chain of command and quality oversight, and a regulatory failure by not ensuring that modifications are properly documented and approved according to company policy, which is often designed to align with regulatory expectations. A third incorrect approach involves delaying the project significantly to conduct an exhaustive, independent review of all related documentation without consulting relevant internal experts. While thoroughness is important, this approach fails to leverage internal expertise and established processes for change management. It can be seen as an inefficient and potentially unnecessary deviation from standard operating procedures, which themselves are designed to incorporate necessary checks and balances. Ethically, it may indicate a lack of trust in the existing quality system or colleagues. From a compliance perspective, it might lead to missed deadlines and project delays without a clear justification that aligns with the company's operational efficiency goals, which are also implicitly linked to regulatory compliance through timely market entry of compliant products. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that prioritizes understanding the why behind procedures, not just the what. When faced with ambiguity or perceived inefficiencies in established processes, the first step should always be to consult the relevant documentation and then seek clarification from the appropriate internal stakeholders, such as senior engineers, project managers, or the quality assurance department. This involves active listening, clear communication of concerns, and a willingness to follow the established protocols for change management and risk assessment. If a procedure appears outdated or overly burdensome, the professional approach is to propose a formal review or amendment through the designated channels, rather than unilaterally deviating from it. This ensures that all changes are made in a controlled, documented, and compliant manner, safeguarding both the company's integrity and its regulatory standing. Question 13. Cost-benefit analysis shows that outsourcing the company's customer data processing to a third-party vendor could significantly reduce operational expenses. However, the vendor's proposed security protocols appear less stringent than the company's current internal standards, raising concerns about potential data privacy risks and compliance with data protection regulations. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Conduct a thorough due diligence process on the vendor, including a detailed assessment of their data security and privacy practices, and consult with internal legal and compliance teams to ensure alignment with all applicable data protection regulations before making a decision. Option B. Negotiate a lower price with the vendor by accepting their current security protocols, emphasizing that the company is willing to compromise on security to achieve the desired cost savings. Option C. Proceed with the vendor outsourcing, assuming the cost savings outweigh the perceived minor risks, and address any potential data privacy issues if they arise. Option D. Inform the vendor that their security protocols are insufficient and immediately terminate discussions, seeking alternative cost-saving measures that do not involve third-party data processing. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the vendor outsourcing, assuming the cost savings outweigh the perceived minor risks, and address any potential data privacy issues if they arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate cost savings against potential long-term risks and regulatory compliance. The decision-maker must exercise careful judgment to ensure that cost-cutting measures do not inadvertently lead to breaches of ethical standards or regulatory requirements, particularly concerning data privacy and security. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment and adherence to established data protection regulations. By engaging legal and compliance teams, the company demonstrates a commitment to understanding and mitigating potential legal and ethical ramifications before implementing changes. This proactive stance aligns with the principles of responsible data stewardship and ensures that any cost-saving measures are implemented within a framework of legal and ethical compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering data security implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for data privacy regulations, which mandate specific security measures to protect sensitive information. Such an approach could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust due to data breaches. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established internal review processes for cost-saving initiatives would also be professionally unacceptable. This failure represents a disregard for internal governance and risk management protocols. It can lead to poorly vetted decisions that overlook critical compliance requirements or introduce unforeseen operational risks, ultimately undermining the company's integrity and operational stability. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should include identifying potential risks, legal, ethical, operational, reputational, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation strategies. Crucially, it necessitates consultation with relevant stakeholders, including legal, compliance, IT security, and business unit representatives, to ensure all perspectives and regulatory obligations are considered before any decision is finalized and implemented. Question 14. The efficiency study reveals that a newly implemented automated screening tool for the Mitsubishi electric hiring assessment test has significantly reduced processing time. However, there is a concern that the tool's algorithms might be implicitly prioritizing candidates based on criteria not explicitly permitted by the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines governing this assessment. Which of the following actions best represents the professional and compliant approach to this situation? Option A. Immediately cease using the new screening tool and revert to the previous manual process until the tool's compliance can be fully verified against the Mitsubishi electric hiring assessment test's specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines. Option B. Implement the new screening tool and seek general industry best practices for algorithmic fairness to ensure compliance with the Mitsubishi electric hiring assessment test's specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines. Option C. Continue using the new screening tool while initiating a review of its algorithms, assuming that the efficiency gains outweigh any minor potential deviations from the specified regulatory framework. Option D. Utilize the new screening tool and document the potential compliance concerns for future review, prioritizing the immediate efficiency benefits demonstrated by the study. The correct answer is A. Immediately cease using the new screening tool and revert to the previous manual process until the tool's compliance can be fully verified against the Mitsubishi electric hiring assessment test's specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a newly implemented process, intended to improve efficiency, has inadvertently created a potential compliance risk. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for operational improvement with the absolute necessity of adhering to the Mitsubishi electric hiring assessment test's specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines. The pressure to demonstrate the success of the new process can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential compliance issues, requiring careful judgment and a commitment to ethical conduct. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the new process against the established regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the Mitsubishi electric hiring assessment test. This demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing compliance and risk mitigation. Specifically, it aligns with the principle of adhering strictly to the defined jurisdiction, ensuring that no external or generic regulatory interpretations are applied. This proactive identification and rectification of potential noncompliance safeguards the integrity of the assessment process and upholds the company's commitment to fair and lawful hiring practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming the new process is compliant simply because it aims for efficiency, without explicit verification against the specified regulatory framework. This represents a failure to exercise due diligence and a potential violation of the strict jurisdiction compliance requirement. It risks overlooking subtle but critical deviations from the exam's guidelines, leading to an invalid assessment or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to seek guidance from general best practices in process improvement, without first confirming their compatibility with the Mitsubishi Electric Hiring Assessment Test's specific regulatory framework. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the absolute priority of adhering only to the specified jurisdiction. It introduces the risk of applying irrelevant or conflicting standards, thereby compromising the integrity of the assessment. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with the new process while acknowledging a potential compliance gap, with the intention of addressing it later. This is a serious ethical and regulatory failure. It demonstrates a disregard for the immediate requirement to operate strictly within the defined framework and prioritizes expediency over compliance. Such an approach could lead to the use of non-compliant assessment methods, invalidating results and potentially leading to legal or disciplinary action. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a structured decision-making process. First, they must clearly identify the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines applicable to the Mitsubishi Electric Hiring Assessment Test. Second, they should meticulously compare the new process against these defined requirements, identifying any discrepancies or potential conflicts. Third, if any non-compliance is identified, the immediate priority must be to halt or modify the process to ensure full adherence before proceeding. Seeking clarification from internal compliance officers or legal counsel specializing in the relevant jurisdiction is a crucial step if any ambiguity exists. The overarching principle is that adherence to the specified regulatory framework is non-negotiable. Question 15. Investigation of a financial advisor's response when a client, with a moderate risk tolerance and a short-term savings goal, specifically requests to invest a significant portion of their portfolio in a highly speculative, illiquid alternative asset fund that has historically exhibited extreme volatility. The advisor has access to this fund and could facilitate the investment. Option A. The advisor suggests that the client should seek independent financial advice before proceeding with such a high-risk investment, without offering any guidance or alternatives themselves. Option B. The advisor informs the client that they cannot invest in the requested fund due to its speculative nature, without further explanation or offering any alternative investment options. Option C. The advisor explains to the client that the requested fund's risk profile and illiquidity are not aligned with their stated moderate risk tolerance and short-term savings goal, and therefore, it is not a suitable recommendation. The advisor then proposes alternative investments that better match the client's objectives and risk tolerance, providing detailed explanations for these suggestions. Option D. The advisor proceeds with the client's request to invest in the speculative fund, highlighting its potential for high returns and downplaying the associated risks and illiquidity to ensure client satisfaction. The correct answer is C. The advisor explains to the client that the requested fund's risk profile and illiquidity are not aligned with their stated moderate risk tolerance and short-term savings goal, and therefore, it is not a suitable recommendation. The advisor then proposes alternative investments that better match the client's objectives and risk tolerance, providing detailed explanations for these suggestions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate desire for a specific investment product and the advisor's fiduciary duty to recommend suitable investments based on the client's best interests. The advisor must navigate the pressure to satisfy the client's request while upholding regulatory obligations and ethical standards. The challenge lies in balancing client satisfaction with the imperative of responsible financial advice, especially when the requested product might not align with the client's risk tolerance or financial goals. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing the client's best interests, a cornerstone of fiduciary duty. This involves conducting a thorough suitability assessment, which includes understanding the client's financial situation, investment objectives, risk tolerance, and knowledge of investments. By explaining why the requested product may not be suitable and offering alternatives that better align with the client's profile, the advisor fulfills their regulatory and ethical obligations. This approach is justified by regulations that mandate suitability and client-centric advice, ensuring that recommendations are not driven by product availability or potential commissions, but by the client's actual needs and circumstances. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the client's request without a proper suitability assessment. This constitutes a significant regulatory failure, as it violates the principle of acting in the client's best interest. Ethically, it is a breach of trust and fiduciary duty, potentially exposing the client to undue risk and leading to poor investment outcomes. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright, without providing a clear explanation or offering alternatives. The client's request might be ill-advised. A complete refusal without further engagement can damage the client relationship and fail to educate the client about appropriate investment strategies. This approach, while not directly violating a specific suitability rule, can be seen as a failure in client communication and a lack of diligence in exploring all avenues to meet the client's underlying needs. A third incorrect approach is to subtly steer the client towards the requested product by downplaying its risks or exaggerating its potential benefits, even after a suitability assessment indicates it's not ideal. This is a serious ethical and regulatory violation, as it involves misrepresentation and a failure to provide objective advice. It prioritizes potential revenue or client appeasement over the client's financial well-being. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the client's profile and objectives. Second, evaluate the suitability of any requested product against this profile. Third, communicate findings transparently and explain the rationale behind recommendations, including why a requested product may or may not be suitable. Fourth, offer suitable alternatives and discuss their merits and risks. Finally, document all advice and client interactions meticulously. This process ensures compliance, upholds ethical standards, and builds long-term client trust. Question 16. What factors determine the most effective way for a Mitsubishi Electric sales representative to articulate the value proposition of a new industrial automation product to a potential client, considering their specific operational challenges and strategic goals? Option A. The representatives focus on highlighting the product's most advanced technical specifications, regardless of their relevance to the client's operations. Option B. The representative's emphasis on the product's price point and potential for short-term cost savings, without a comprehensive understanding of its long-term impact. Option C. The representative's reliance on generic marketing materials that describe the product's capabilities without tailoring the message to the client's unique situation. Option D. The representative's ability to translate technical product features into tangible business benefits that directly address the client's stated needs and objectives. The correct answer is D. The representative's ability to translate technical product features into tangible business benefits that directly address the client's stated needs and objectives. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a sales representative for Mitsubishi Electric is tasked with understanding and articulating the benefits of a new industrial automation product to a potential client. The challenge lies in accurately translating technical specifications into tangible business advantages that resonate with the client's specific operational needs and strategic goals. Misinterpreting or overstating these benefits can lead to client dissatisfaction, reputational damage, and potential contractual disputes. The representative must navigate the technical complexities of the product, while also demonstrating a keen understanding of the client's business context. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the Mitsubishi Electric product's technical capabilities and a diligent effort to map these capabilities to the client's stated operational challenges and objectives. This requires active listening, asking probing questions to clarify the client's needs, and then presenting the product's features as solutions to those specific problems. For example, if a client expresses concerns about production downtime, the representative should highlight how the product's enhanced reliability or predictive maintenance features directly address this issue, thereby demonstrating value. This approach aligns with ethical sales practices and the implied warranty of fitness for a particular purpose, ensuring that the product is presented as a genuine solution rather than just a generic offering. It also fosters trust and builds a long-term client relationship based on mutual understanding and benefit. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the technical specifications of the product without considering the client's specific business context. This fails to demonstrate how the product solves the client's problems, potentially leading to a sale based on a misunderstanding of value. Ethically, this can be seen as a failure to act in the client's best interest, as the product may not be the most suitable solution for their needs. Another incorrect approach would be to make unsubstantiated claims about the product's performance or benefits that cannot be backed by data or technical evidence. This constitutes misrepresentation and can lead to significant legal and reputational consequences, violating principles of honesty and integrity in business dealings. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize closing the sale over understanding the client's needs, leading to a hard sell tactic. This disregards the client's genuine requirements and can result in a sale that is not in the client's long-term interest, damaging the Mitsubishi electric brand and the representative's professional credibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centric approach. This involves a structured process of discovery, understanding, and solutioning. First, actively listen to and clarify the client's needs and challenges. Second, thoroughly understand the product's capabilities and limitations. Third, connect the product's features to the client's specific needs, articulating the tangible benefits and value proposition. Finally, be prepared to provide evidence and address any concerns transparently. This methodical approach ensures that recommendations are sound, ethical, and aligned with both the client's objectives and the company's commitment to quality and customer satisfaction. Question 17. When evaluating a new product line's potential market entry, and internal reports suggest a possible, though unconfirmed, risk of minor environmental contamination during its manufacturing process, what is the most professionally responsible course of action from a stakeholder perspective, considering potential regulatory scrutiny? Option A. Initiate an immediate, independent environmental impact assessment and engage with regulatory bodies to understand potential compliance requirements before proceeding with full-scale production. Option B. Proceed with the product launch as planned, assuming the reported contamination risk is negligible and will not attract regulatory attention, to meet investor expectations for timely returns. Option C. Inform key investors about the potential environmental risk to manage expectations, but delay any external investigations or regulatory engagement until the product is established in the market. Option D. Conduct a cursory internal review of the manufacturing process and only address the contamination issue if a formal complaint is received from a regulatory agency. The correct answer is A. Initiate an immediate, independent environmental impact assessment and engage with regulatory bodies to understand potential compliance requirements before proceeding with full-scale production. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations concerning product safety and environmental impact. The pressure to meet profit targets can lead to a temptation to downplay or delay addressing potential issues. Careful judgment is required to balance stakeholder expectations, particularly those of investors seeking returns, with the paramount responsibility to ensure product safety and comply with environmental regulations. The correct approach, which prioritizes a thorough, independent investigation into the reported safety concerns and potential environmental noncompliance, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of corporate social responsibility and good governance, which are increasingly embedded in regulatory frameworks. Specifically, it upholds the duty of care owed to consumers and the environment, and demonstrates a commitment to transparency and accountability. Such an approach proactively mitigates legal, reputational, and financial risks associated with product defects or environmental damage, and fosters trust among all stakeholders. An incorrect approach that dismisses the concerns without adequate investigation fails to uphold the duty of care. This could lead to significant regulatory penalties, legal liabilities, and severe reputational damage if the issues are later proven to be valid. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for consumer safety and environmental protection. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively sharing information with stakeholders to manage perceptions rather than providing a complete picture, constitutes a breach of transparency and potentially misleading conduct. This erodes trust and can lead to accusations of deception, resulting in regulatory sanctions and loss of investor confidence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential issues, evaluating their severity and likelihood, and determining appropriate mitigation strategies. Professionals should always err on the side of caution when safety or regulatory compliance is at stake, seeking independent expert advice, maintaining thorough documentation of all investigations and decisions, and communicating openly and honestly with all relevant stakeholders, even when the news is unfavorable, are crucial elements of sound professional judgment. Adherence to the company's code of conduct and relevant industry regulations should guide every step. Question 18. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of various stakeholder perspectives. When developing a new product line that may have environmental implications, which approach best balances the interests of shareholders, employees, customers, and regulatory bodies, while ensuring long-term business sustainability and compliance? Option A. Prioritize shareholder value by focusing solely on the product's profitability and market share, assuming regulatory compliance will be addressed reactively. Option B. Conduct extensive market research to identify customer preferences and potential sales volumes, with minimal engagement with environmental regulators until product launch. Option C. Engage proactively with all key stakeholder groups, including environmental agencies, to understand their concerns and integrate their feedback into the product design and manufacturing processes. Alongside financial projections, Option D. Focus on minimizing production costs to maximize profit margins, potentially overlooking employee safety protocols and environmental impact assessments to meet aggressive timelines. The correct answer is A. Prioritize shareholder value by focusing solely on the product's profitability and market share, assuming regulatory compliance will be addressed reactively. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing competing stakeholder interests, particularly when those interests may conflict with the company's long-term strategic goals and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing these interests effectively without compromising ethical standards or legal obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of all stakeholder perspectives, including their potential impact on the business and its regulatory environment. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and responsible business conduct, which emphasize transparency, fairness, and accountability to all parties affected by the company's operations. By actively engaging with diverse stakeholders and considering their feedback in the strategic planning process, Mitsubishi Electric can foster trust, mitigate risks, and build a more sustainable and resilient business. This proactive engagement is crucial for navigating complex regulatory landscapes and ensuring that strategic decisions are not only profitable, but also ethically sound and legally compliant. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing short-term financial returns for shareholders, without adequate consideration for other stakeholders like employees or the environment, would be professionally unacceptable. Such a narrow focus could lead to regulatory breaches, reputational damage, and long-term business instability. For instance, neglecting employee welfare or environmental impact to boost profits could violate labor laws, environmental regulations, or corporate social responsibility guidelines, leading to fines, legal action, and loss of public trust. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the demands of a single powerful stakeholder group, such as a major supplier or a dominant customer, over the broader strategic interests of the company and its other stakeholders, would also be professionally flawed. This could lead to an unbalanced strategy that creates dependencies, exposes the company to undue risk, and potentially alienates other crucial stakeholders. This approach fails to uphold the principle of equitable consideration for all parties involved. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured stakeholder analysis. This includes identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their interests, power, and potential impact, and assessing how their interests align or conflict with the company's strategic objectives and regulatory obligations. The next step is to develop engagement strategies for each stakeholder group, followed by integrating stakeholder feedback into the strategic planning process in a balanced and objective manner. Finally, continuous monitoring and evaluation of stakeholder relationships and their impact on strategic outcomes are essential for adaptive management and sustained success. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a critical component for an upcoming product launch is experiencing manufacturing delays, potentially impacting the project's timeline and budget. The project manager is considering a minor deviation from a specific quality control procedure for this component, which they believe will not affect the component's functionality, but will allow the project to stay on schedule. What is the most appropriate course of action for the project manager to take? Option A. Inform the project team of the potential delay and explore alternative sourcing options for the component, even if it means a significant budget increase. Option B. Document the proposed deviation, clearly outlining the rationale and potential impact, and seek formal approval from the relevant quality assurance and engineering departments before proceeding. Option C. Implement the deviation and monitor the component's performance closely in the field, addressing any issues that arise post-launch. Option D. Proceed with the minor deviation without formal documentation or approval, assuming the risk is negligible and the time savings are critical for the launch. The correct answer is B. Document the proposed deviation, clearly outlining the rationale and potential impact, and seek formal approval from the relevant quality assurance and engineering departments before proceeding. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the immediate financial pressures of a project with the long-term reputational and regulatory implications of potential shortcut. The project manager is under pressure to deliver within budget and on time, creating a temptation to bypass established quality control procedures. This conflict requires careful judgment to prioritize compliance and ethical conduct over short-term gains. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to the Mitsubishi Electric's internal quality management system and relevant industry standards. This aligns with the company's commitment to product reliability and customer satisfaction, which are key stakeholder expectations. By documenting the deviation and seeking formal approval, the project manager demonstrates transparency, accountability, and a commitment to regulatory compliance. This proactive approach mitigates risks of future product failures, recalls, and damage to Mitsubishi Electric's reputation, ultimately serving the best interests of all stakeholders, including customers, shareholders, and employees. It upholds the ethical principle of integrity and responsible conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the deviation without documentation or approval. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates internal quality control protocols, which are designed to ensure product safety and performance. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of integrity and a willingness to compromise standards for expediency. This could lead to product defects, customer dissatisfaction, potential legal liabilities, and severe reputational damage for Mitsubishi Electric. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the feedback and proceed as originally planned, assuming the deviation is minor. This is also a regulatory and ethical failure. It dismisses stakeholder concerns and potential risks without proper investigation. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for established procedures. This can lead to unforeseen problems, erode trust with stakeholders, and potentially result in non-compliance with quality standards. A third incorrect approach is to implement the deviation and hope it goes unnoticed. This is a clear ethical breach and a potential regulatory violation. It involves deception and a lack of accountability. If discovered, it would severely damage trust and could lead to disciplinary action, legal repercussions, and significant harm to Mitsubishi Electric's brand. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should follow a structured decision-making process. First, clearly identify the ethical and regulatory considerations. Second, assess the potential risks and consequences of each course of action. Third, consult relevant internal policies, procedures, and external regulations. Fourth, seek guidance from supervisors or ethics committees if the situation is unclear. Finally, choose the option that upholds integrity, transparency, and compliance, even if it presents short-term challenges. This process ensures responsible decision-making that protects the company and its stakeholders. Question 20. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess how a project manager should respond when a significant investor group expresses strong opposition to a proposed sustainability initiative, citing potential short-term profit reductions, while other stakeholders, including employees and environmental advocacy groups, strongly support the initiative for its long-term benefits and ethical implications. Option A. Prioritize transparent communication with all stakeholder groups, clearly outlining the potential financial implications, the long-term strategic benefits of the sustainability initiative, and the company's commitment to ethical business practices, while actively seeking input for mitigation strategies. Option B. Immediately halt the sustainability initiative to appease the investor group and avoid any potential short-term financial downturn without further consultation. Option C. Proceed with the sustainability initiative as planned, disregarding the investor group's concerns as purely short-term focused and therefore less important than the long-term benefits. Option D. Engage in private discussions with the investor group to offer them preferential financial terms or concessions to secure their approval, without informing other stakeholders of these arrangements. The correct answer is A. Prioritize transparent communication with all stakeholder groups, clearly outlining the potential financial implications, the long-term strategic benefits of the sustainability initiative, and the company's commitment to ethical business practices, while actively seeking input for mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate financial interests of a specific stakeholder group and the broader, long-term sustainability and ethical obligations of the company. Navigating this requires a nuanced understanding of stakeholder management principles and adherence to the Mitsubishi Electric hiring assessment tests implied ethical framework, which prioritizes responsible business conduct and fair treatment of all parties. The correct approach, which involves transparent communication and a balanced consideration of all stakeholder impacts, represents best professional practice because it aligns with principles of corporate social responsibility and good governance. It acknowledges that while immediate financial gains are important, they should not come at the expense of other stakeholders' legitimate interests or the company's long-term reputation and operational integrity. This approach fosters trust and can lead to more sustainable solutions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes only the immediate financial gains of a vocal stakeholder group fails to uphold ethical duties towards other stakeholders, such as employees, customers, or the wider community. This can lead to regulatory scrutiny, reputational damage, and potential legal challenges. Another incorrect approach that dismisses the concerns of the vocal stakeholder group without proper investigation or consideration demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can be perceived as unfair or dismissive, potentially escalating the conflict and undermining trust. A third incorrect approach that seeks to placate the vocal stakeholder group through non-transparent or misleading information is ethically unsound and can lead to severe regulatory penalties and a loss of credibility. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and understanding their respective interests and potential impacts. This should be followed by an objective assessment of the situation, considering both short-term and long-term consequences. Ethical principles and relevant regulatory guidelines must be applied to evaluate different courses of action. Finally, open and honest communication with all stakeholders, aiming for a mutually acceptable resolution, should be prioritized.